There we go. So here's our sphere. I'm going to create a texture for it. So I'm going to go into here. I'm going to create a texture, pixels. And everything that I do kind of builds up and makes that rendering time take longer and longer. I'm choosing something that's 512 pixels by 512 pixels. Okay? That's going to give me an image size that's 768 kilobytes. If I chose, this is like typically the max we can do, 8192, 8,000 pixels by 8,000 pixels, you can see how my image size goes up to 192 megabytes. All right? So for the computer to calculate that on one object, and then I duplicate that object 1,000 times, you can see where the computer can really start to get slow. It's kind of like if you're in InDesign or Illustrator and you have your document opened up full-blown and you can see everything and whatever. All right? So it goes really slow. So we just try to keep everything manageable. 72 DPI doesn't matter. The only people who care about resolution are people who are printing. Okay? So designers care about it, photographers care about it. Everyone else doesn't. We only care about how many pixels this way, how many pixels that way. Okay? So this is, I'm just going to create something very simple. There we go. That's beautiful. And we'll make this red. Wonderful. I'm going to transform my selection. Shrink it down to about there. Maybe a little bit more. Cut that out. And then I'll just drop in, what's the red ball, number 1? Any ideas? We'll say 1. 3, there we go. That sounds better. There we go. Okay, so there's my texture. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to put it, I'm just going to put it into the default folder. 3 ball. There we go. So now I'm just going to take this and I'm going to apply it to the object. And this is, you can kind of see all the craziness that's involved in doing just a simple thing like this. There it is. You can see menus all over the place. Okay, so there's my 3 ball. It doesn't look like it's placed correctly, so I'm going to place it correctly. There we go. And I'm not going to see it from the other side, but you'll see the 3 is backwards. So we don't care about that. There we go. So there's a little ground plane. Here's this 3 ball. Let's add some lights to this. If you've had photography, at some point they told you about lighting and how important lighting is to creating a good picture. Same thing happens here. Typically, when 3D was getting really, really big, it was much easier to teach photographers 3D than it was to teach 3D people how to light stuff correctly. Okay, so they brought in photographers to do all their lighting, or they had photographers sitting over shoulders of people who could do the 3D. And the same thing with animators. It's easier to teach an animator how to do stuff than it was teach someone else how to animate. So now we're at the rendering stage. Bam, there we go. And there's my 3 ball. Wonderful. Let's go into here, and I can adjust some of these settings too to make this even look better, because right now it just kind of looks boring. So I'm going to adjust some of my settings that are going to make this look more realistic, because right now if we look at that image, it looks like a 3 ball, but it doesn't really look like a 3 ball, right? It just looks very static and very not interesting. And this is advanced stuff. You're not going to be tested on this stuff right now. Eventually we'll get to this stage where you're doing this kind of stuff. Okay, no lights in the scene. My light is too dim, so I will crank this up. There you go. So now it's a bit more interesting. We can go further and further and further and start tweaking what this looks like. But it definitely looks a lot better than it did before. I'm actually going to make this a lot bigger. Pull that up more so I don't have so big of a shadow. I also wanted to, just for fun, let's take this. Oops. And I'm just going to duplicate it a bunch of times. And we could do regular animation on this, but it's much easier to do dynamics when we have something like that. So I'm just going to add dynamics to this. Somewhere in here, there it is. So now they're all falling. So now I'm going to make this passive, plane, static. There we go. And you'll see they land perfectly right on top of each other. Let me hide these guys. Oops, wrong ones. Oh, that was right. All right, those are just there for calculations. Right, collisions. That's why. Sphere. There we go. It took a little bit of nudging. Sometimes things happen so perfectly in 3D that nothing, doesn't move around. So there we go. All right, so it's a much more interesting picture now that we have all these. And still thinking, still thinking. All right, so it's still rendering this one frame. On the bottom left here, I'm looking at this progress. There we go. All right. So for these pool balls here on this ground, with a light in the scene and a little bit of dynamics in there, for one single frame, it took us 36 seconds. I can't speed that up. Okay, so if you look down here at the bottom, if you can see it, it says 36 seconds on there. So now imagine you have a scene like Toy Story or like any of those other movies where they have 1,000 characters, and those 1,000 characters are doing something crazy all at the same time. And then they have lights for all those scenes, and then they have animation and dynamics and all this other stuff going on. You can imagine how long some of this stuff is going to take, okay? But in a nutshell, in a very, very quick, I don't know how long it took, 5 minutes, to build that scene, you can see how you can create stuff very quickly, okay? And just like I talked about that first day, anything that we want to do is just going to take time to do that. Just this process here of being able to spin around the scene and move stuff is going to take some time to get used to, okay? I can do it right now without looking, but a lot of people when they first start, you have to look to see which buttons you're hitting, okay? There's no easy way to do it. There's nothing that I can say or do to make that process easier. It's just you playing with those tools, all right? All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to the Start menu, which is on the bottom left, and we're going to go to Computer. And in computer, you'll see that there's a C drive, a D drive, and on some of yours there's an E drive or an O drive or some other recovery drive. Okay, the D drive is where we save our stuff. In mine, I have a folder called Maya, and I have a Sarcona folder, and I have some other stuff inside here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start by creating some folders to help keep us organized. Organization is in peril to your success in the class. So we're going to make a folder, and you're going to call it whatever your last name is, underscore F14. Okay, so just like I have mine, Sarcona underscore F14. Okay, inside that folder, you're going to make a new folder called 2510. 2510 is the course that we're in. The hotkey for creating a new folder is Control N. Nope, Control Shift N. There we go, they changed it. Okay, inside the 2510 folder, you're going to make a work folder and a source folder, two separate folders. So we're going to go into the Maya folder if it's there. And if there is a 2014 or 2015 folder, we're going to delete it. Okay? Those two folders are preference folders for Maya. If Maya saves your preferences right out into an area you can see, that way you can back them up. Have you ever been in Photoshop, created a brush, and said, wow, I'd love to save this brush, but you have to dig and dig and dig through all the Photoshop stuff in order to find that brush, or export it, or do this other fancy work. Maya doesn't do that. Maya keeps it right out in the open for you, so you can just grab your preferences and go. Okay? And your preferences are going to be very important. When he's working on his stuff, and then he leaves for the day, and someone else comes in and they start working on their stuff, and then someone else comes in and they start working on their stuff, your files can be put in areas you don't want them. So we always go through and delete the old preferences, and we're going to put new preferences in here. We don't have those preferences yet. We're going to add those preferences. Okay? So now what we're going to do is on the bottom right of your screen, I don't have this because I was never created it. On the bottom right, you have this little arrow, and the arrow should go to 3D, and you should be able to go to Maya. Otherwise, you can just click on the Windows thing and type in Maya 2015 and open it up. Okay? So we're using Maya 2015. So open up Maya 2015. At any point, if you get stuck, let me know. Every single time Maya opens, it pops open this output window, which is right here. Your first inclination when you see this window is to close it. Everyone closes this window, okay? Don't close the window. It's just going to keep popping up. Minimize this window. So if you see the output window, just minimize it. It'll hide down here. You won't see it. Just leave it there, okay? If you close it, every time you do certain features in Maya, it pops open that window again. Then you have to close it. And it pops it open again. Then you have to close it. Okay? Looks like everyone has Maya pretty much open. There's maybe two things that open up. One, what's new highlight settings? Doesn't matter to you because everything's new to you. Okay? So you can turn off show this at startup. I'm going to turn it off. The other thing is this little tips and movies, okay? If you forget how to, after this class or 3 classes from now, you forget how to create and view objects, you forget how to zoom and pan or move or do any of these top 6 things, you can watch a little video on that and it'll guide you through how to do those things, okay? Or if you're at home and you just forgot, your hotkeys or forgot any of the stuff, real quick you can watch those. I don't need them. I'm going to turn that off and then close this, okay? So close on yours, close those 2 windows. I would recommend do the show at startup off because you're not going to want those pretty much ever. Also, this window that's open here, we're going to make it bigger. So if we click on this maximize, we'll maximize that window. For whatever reason, it always cuts it off. Okay? So this is the entire Maya interface. Walking through some of this stuff, you'll see some of the things that we're going to be touching on. Some of the stuff that's on here you're never, ever, ever going to need. some of the stuff you will need probably on a daily basis. Okay. Up here we have the menu bar. Just like every other program, Photoshop, Illustrator, any of those, they have the menu bar. Those are where you can get your menu items. Okay. This guy on the left that says polygons, that's where we can switch our menu bar to a different menu bar. So right now it's showing us different tools that we would use for polygons. If you click that and switch it to anything else, you'll see that that menu bar on top changes. So just for fun, switch your menu bar a couple times and just see what happens. So now we're going to have our first hotkeys. If you hit F2, on mine it's not doing anything because I'm already in the animation menu. If you hit F3, it switches to polygons. Hit F4, it takes you to surfaces. Hit F5, it takes you to dynamics. And if you hit F6, it takes you to rendering. So if you look at your hotkey sheet, there's ones that say menus. So using those hotkeys, figure out which ones go into which button. F2 through F6 are those. All right, so that's what the menu sets are. And by going to these, we do different things. Depending on what we're doing at the time, we're going to switch to the polygon or the animation or whatever. Once you get to a certain level, you will never touch that F2, F3, F6, okay? Move your mouse to the center of this area here where the little black X is. See this black X where our grid is? And then hold down the space bar. Is yours not working? Oh, you're still in that. We have to get out of the menu first. There you go. You're getting out of there. Then hold down the space bar. Okay, so hit escape if nothing happened. Or click in the middle of the box and then click the space bar. There we go. Okay, this is called the hot box. That's the next one that's underneath all those menus. So by holding the space bar, that opens up the hot box. So this houses every single one of those menus that we saw are right here, plus extra menus, okay? There's also a recent commands. Recent commands is like, oh, I just did this tool. I can jump to that tool that I just did. Very, very handy. There's also this view, shading, lighting. That's this menu right here. So there's even like menus inside of menus. And then that's it. Yep. Okay. And you could even, if you look at the bottom of this menu, you can customize. So you can actually make your own menu set. If you're like, I know when I do modeling or when I work in Maya, I'm using this menu and this menu and that menu, you can make your own menu set. It's very, very cool. Okay. Think of like Photoshop or InDesign or any of those other programs where you're constantly doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's great to be able to just say, let me create something that's very easy to access. Okay. Even hotkeys, you could assign a hotkey to anything. You can make up your own hotkeys. It's crazy the amount you could do. All right, so there's all the menu bars and menu stuff. Okay, so if you didn't write it down, make sure you wrote on your menus area, hotbox is hold spacebar. Some of you found out the other one, which is tapping the spacebar. Okay, tapping the spacebar pops you out of the perspective view, and it takes you into a different view. Okay, this is if you've ever had drafting. Has anyone had drafting before? No. All right. In drafting, this is like a typical thing that you would do. Is that in order for you to see what the top of your object looks like, the front, and the side of your object looks like, they have these little drawings here. Okay, so if you've ever seen a drafting drawing, that's typically what you would see. On our homework sheet, eventually we'll get to one of our things is to draw stuff. So if we're looking at this bowling pin, if we're looking at it from the front view, we would see that. Okay. If we're looking at it from the side view, we would see that. If we're looking at it from the top view, we would see that. And if we're looking at it from perspective, we would see, in perspective. Okay. One thing about those views is that there's no distortion to it. If I'm looking dead on at a street, the street's going to look like it's closing off, right? There's a bit of perspective in there, right? Yes? In these views here, these three views, there wouldn't be any of that because those streets are typically like straight on. Okay, so there's no perspective. So even if I created a cube here and I stretched it out really, really long and I just scooted it over, in this view you can see, hey, that looks like what we would see, that perspective coming together. But in our top view, it's straight. It's perfectly straight. In our front view, perfectly straight. In our side view, perfectly straight. Okay? So there's no bit of distortion in any of those views. They're literally what it would look like if everything in that object was smashed together into one little piece. Okay? So Maya is also a mouse sensitive as to where you are at and what buttons you're clicking. So if I tap the space bar here, you can see how I'm jumping in and out of perspective view. Okay? But if I move my mouse, I don't have to click it. If I just move my mouse over the top view and tap the space bar, it jumps me into the top view. Okay? So take a couple seconds and just get used to switching between these views this way. Alright, so now we're back in perspective view. What we want to be able to do is we want to be able to spin around this view. Okay? So right now everyone's at the default except for me, or most of the people are. One of the hotkeys we're going to disable eventually is this little scroll wheel that's on the mouse. It's a horrible hotkey, okay? But they allow you to use a scroll wheel to zoom in and out. You probably use that in Photoshop or Illustrator, okay? The problem with it, and I'm going to show you the problem so you can ignore me and just use it anyway, is that when we get to something like this and we want to get really close to it, this thing just like jumps us in and out, okay? There's no smoothness getting between there. So this other hotkey that we're going to use allows us to get pretty close to it without having to do that. All right, so our hotkeys are all based on the keyboard. I had a keyboard over here and I lost it or something. I don't know what happened to it. But anyway, as you're working, is anyone left-handed in the class? No one, surprising. Okay. So if you're right-handed, your left hand is going to go on the bottom left of the keyboard. Okay, that's where you're working in 3D is typically where you keep it, and then your right hand goes on the mouse. You're going to use the Alt key, and then the Alt key plus the mouse is going to allow us to move around. So our first one is Alt and left mouse button allow us to tumble around. Okay, so hold the Alt key and hold the left mouse button, and you can tumble around. This allows us to spin around our scene in order to see behind it. Okay? So if we wanted to see what the back of the bowling pin looks like or the back of the stapler, we would hold Alt and use the left mouse button to spin around. Okay? So on our navigation, our orbit is Alt plus LMB, left mouse button. Okay. Our next one is Alt and middle mouse button. Now, if it makes it easier, I'm like crazy about efficiency, the easiest way to do something. Okay. Some people, I wish I could pull one of these. I'm gonna pull this keyboard off. Okay, so for me, I use my thumb right on this Alt key. Some people, for whatever reason, use their pinky, which kind of locks you up into whatever else you're trying to do. Okay, so get in the habit of using your thumb on that Alt key, because all of our hotkeys, our major hotkeys, are going to be on this side of the keyboard. Okay, so if you use your thumb as your Alt key, it makes everything else easier. And as we go, I'm going to give you little tips, because sometimes, just so you can see it, sometimes our hotkeys are going to be like Control D, okay? And if your thumb is here, then Control D is hard to get to. So, you know, some of those you'll hit. All right, so Alt left mouse button is that one. Alt middle mouse button is what's called tracking or panning. And it's just shifting that scene around, okay? So Alt middle mouse button is panning. Okay? And when you zoom in and out with Alt right mouse button, go left and right. Don't go up and down. It might seem like intuitive to go up and down, but it's really, really slow. Alt right mouse button, left and right, you can see it goes much quicker, much smoother. Okay? So those are our 3 hotkeys there. There's also left bracket and right bracket. So if I'm zoomed in here, and I say that's perfect, that's where I want to be, and then I accidentally go whoops, and I zoom out, or I spin it around and do something I don't want to do, I can use that left bracket to get my camera back to where I was. Okay, so it's undoing my views. Typically this is helpful for you're modeling something, you zoom out, take a look at it, and then jump back to where you were. Okay, you'll be surprised at how difficult tracking and zooming and doing all these 3 moves to get to the spot on our model we need to get to will become. Okay, there's going to be some times when we're creating something, and I'll use a sphere as my example, where I want to grab a portion of the sphere like that. Okay, so I rotated and tracked and zoomed until that sphere was pretty much laid out flat, and then I could grab pieces of it and I could start deleting it. If I wasn't in the right spot and I tried to do that and I deleted it, you can see that my sphere was not perfectly cut. Okay, so that's going to be you might spend a whole week or 2 weeks as you're doing this just struggling with these tools, just trying to get used to those things. Okay, it's more important than something like Photoshop or Illustrator where you have a lot of the tools like right there where it's like that's how I move and that's how I zoom. Okay, it all has to be done with hotkeys. It'll take you forever to do it any other way. Okay, so that's that.
And what's the right bracket do?
The right bracket goes to the next view. So if I zoomed in here and then I made a mistake, or I zoomed way out, let's say, I can go left bracket to zoom back in, and then right bracket to redo my view. Okay, so left bracket is to go backwards, go to the last view, and then the right bracket is to go to the next view. And it will like loop, like it'll actually go forward and then loop back to the beginning. It only saves so many of these. I don't know how many. Okay, let's create an object. Okay. Before we create an object, we're going to turn some stuff off. There's some defaults in Maya that I really dislike. We're going to turn them off so they don't annoy me. So under the Create menu here, under NURBS primitives, we're going to turn off interactive creation. So Create, NURBS, turn off interactive creation. Okay, and then go to Create Polygon and turn off interactive creation. Just using these menus you're going to find is also a bit of a trick, just because sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get where you want to get.
Do you have to turn those off every time?
No, because we're going to save our preferences so that every time it'll be back to the way we set it at the end. Okay, so now under Create Polygon, just create any one of these objects that are inside here. Okay, so just click on any one of these objects. I'm going to click on Helix. That's my favorite one. Okay, so just create an object. You'll see that you don't have your buttons on. I'll turn mine off. You'll see that this object comes in with this like green wireframe around it. Okay, think back to your Illustrator class where you did the gradient mesh. It's kind of like that. This wireframe that goes around it is all the little pieces that make it up. Okay, if I went and created a plane, just going to scoot it over, and I'm going to take down the divisions. Okay, this is all the points that it needs to be a plane. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 points there, and that makes a plane. Once we start creating other objects like a cube, then we start adding more points to it in order to create that shape. So now we have 8 points for a cube because of that. When we get into stuff like this, there's just a whole lot of points to define that shape. Okay, so typically as we work, we'll deal with those points and we'll manipulate them how we need to. All right, so now we have this object. So I want you to do is just zoom really far away from your object. Make sure it's still selected. Okay, but I don't want you to be able to be like right on top of it. 2 hotkeys. Number 1 is frame selected. It's F. So we just hit F. Okay. Now if we didn't have the object selected, obviously frame selected would not work. Okay, so that's why you had to have the object selected. The next one is frame all. That's A. Okay, right now it's not going to do anything because we've already framed that object. But if we zoom out and hit A, then it will frame that object, even if we don't have it selected. If we have an entire scene, an entire city, and we hit A, it'll frame everything. Okay, typically don't use all unless I don't have something selected. All right, so that's the navigation. Now the whole time we're doing this stuff, the whole time we're turning around the object and we're zooming in and out and we're panning and we're framing and going back and forth views, what's actually happening is we're looking through a camera. Okay, in 3D there's a camera that we're looking through, and that's how we see the object. So when we turn around the object, we're actually moving this camera around. All right, so I'm going to show you that camera just so you can see it. Cameras. Okay, so here, if I zoom out, this is my top camera, this is my front, and this is my side camera. So when I hit the tab key, or the space bar, and I'm looking at the front view, that's the camera I'm looking for. And as I move around, you can see that that front view is moving. Okay, now I can't do any tumbling, any orbiting inside of those the front, top, or side view. Okay, there's no spinning around inside of these. But I can pan and I can zoom in those views, and you'll see that that adjusts these cameras. If I create a new camera just so you can see that the other one's still sitting there. Where's he at? Hiding. Perspective. There he is. Okay, so there's my original camera that I was creating in order to move around the scene. Okay, and right now because I created a new camera, there's actually another camera inside the scene that I'm looking around in. Okay, so don't think that you're moving the objects. It's very easy to assume that because we are doing this kind of thing that we're moving the objects. We're not. All we're doing is moving that camera around. Okay, and if we wanted to animate our camera, we could animate this camera that's moving around. All right, so let me just reset some of my stuff back to where it was. Hide cameras, and I'm going to delete that extra camera right there. Okay. All right, so now here's our object. All right, so now we're going to learn the move tools. The selection tool is Q. Right now everyone's in the selection tool. That's what this little arrow is up here. And if you're close, that white arrow fits right on top of it. There we go. Okay, so this is the select tool here. The next one doesn't have a hotkey, I don't think, but this is the select marquee tool. I hardly ever use it. We don't need to worry about it. The next one is the paint selection tool. I rarely use it. We don't need to worry about it. Okay, just for fun, let's see. Does it have a hotkey? Come on. No hotkey for that one. No hotkey for that one. That's fine. The move tool is an important one. That's W. Okay. So we're going to hit W for the move tool. And then we're going to be able to click on any one of these arrows and move the object around. Okay, so I'm just clicking and dragging this arrow to move the object exactly where I need it. So rotate tool is R, or E, confuse me. Rotate tool that we have to discuss is that it's not, it's kind of confusing. Okay, it's not very clear cut. Because we're working in 3D, we have three directions. We have the X, Y, and we have the Z direction that we're dealing with. Same thing with rotation. And when we get to scale, same thing with that. We also have on this, you'll see that there's a red, green, and blue circle. And then there's this yellow circle on the outside. The yellow circle will rotate that object parallel to the camera. Okay? So our camera is facing, or perpendicular to camera. Our camera is facing here, it'll rotate it perfectly like that. So if I took this and rotated it, it rotates it at some funky angle. Okay? So for rotation, avoid using this circle. Okay? So as a beginner, never ever ever use that circle because it'll just screw you up. You get used to using this red, blue, or green one. Okay? It will change. Once I click on one of these, you'll see that the yellow goes away. Just know that that outer one don't touch. Just those inner ones you should touch. And you should move those around the way that you need them to move around. Okay? And then we have R, which is scale. Okay? So we hit R for scale, and you'll see that all three of these have different icons. The arrows were for move, the circles were for rotate, and the boxes are for scale. So now we can again just click and drag on those things to scale them up. Okay? So take it. Okay. So now we have that. Let's go to the next one that we're going to go to. We're going to create lights, and we're going to create a spotlight. Okay, so create lights, spotlight. And I want you to move the spotlight away from your object, just like that. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to aim this spotlight at our object. Okay, now we could first, let's scale it up. Okay, so I'm going to go to the scale tool, which is R, and I'm going to use this middle box and just scale this thing up so I can actually see what it's aiming at. Okay, so hit R, drag that yellow box to the right, make it really, really big so you can see what it's aiming at. When we hit the T key, that we actually get two arrows. One arrow is a pointer, one arrow is a origin. Okay, so the one that's at the left side, the pointed side of the spotlight, that's where the spotlight's coming from. This other arrow is what it's pointing at. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this until it's right on my object. Okay, so we should have a spotlight pointing right at our object. Okay, so that's just a quick way, like I said, to get it there. Now the cool thing about the show manipulator is that now that this is kind of like locked into my object, I can move my light. Oops, grab it a different way. I can move my light, and you'll see that it's still pointing at it. No matter where this light is, it still points right at that object. Okay, so that can be a handy thing apart from just the move tool. Because if I just use the move tool and I move this, my light's not pointed at it anymore. Okay, so it's just a handy tool. The show manipulator will come in handy as we get further down and get into some of these other tools. For Spotlight, this is how it works. For other tools, it works in a little bit different fashion. Okay. The next one's going to be Y, which is the last tool used. Just write down Y, and then we'll get to actually using that at some point.
Which word?
For last tool used, right underneath show manipulator. Okay. The next one is increase or decrease manipulator. Typically, this is something done by accident, and then you start freaking out because you don't know what happened. Okay, so I need to make sure you understand the hotkeys to undo what you've done. So the minus key shrinks your manipulator. So you see how I just tapped the minus key a bunch of times, and now my manipulator is super duper tiny, and I can't even get in there to do anything. The plus sign, magically, will make it bigger. And again, now it's too big, it's hard for me to do what I need to do. Okay? So typically, you try to find a happy medium. So minus or plus. Complete tool is enter. Once you're done with the tool, we would just hit enter. Okay. Let's delete what we have in our scene. So we're just going to go to File, New, and don't save. We spent so many hours working on that. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create a sphere. So create polygon sphere. And I'm going to move the sphere. I'm going to use my view here. I'm going to move the sphere vertically just so the bottom of it is basically resting right on that grid. Okay, like the grid is a ground and the sphere is just sitting on the ground. All right, so the next one we're going to do is moving the pivot. Okay, so right now if I took this sphere and I said, okay, I want to rotate the sphere kind of like this, like it's on the end of a ball and chain or a ball and a wire. Okay, right now as I rotate this, it's just doing that. All right? It's not doing what I want to do. So what I want to do is I want to move the pivot for this sphere up here. So I'm going to hold down the D, the letter D, and you'll see that there's 3 lines that come up. Don't do anything yet after you hit D. There's 3 lines that come up. One is red, one is green, and one is blue. I want to grab the green line and just drag the green line up. Okay, the one that goes upward, I'm just dragging it up to whatever it is, just right above it-ish. Okay. Okay, so now that we have this here, now as I rotate this just in the blue direction, you can see that it's rotating the way that I needed it to. Okay? Without doing anything further than just moving the pivot, now it's rotating from that degree, or from that spot. These handlebars, if you look at them, there are 3 colors, red, green, and blue. If I switch to the rotate, red, green, and blue. Switch to the scale, red, green, and blue. There's a reason that they're red, green, and blue, okay? And it's an easy way for you to remember which direction you're moving these things in. If I go to my move tool and I grab this blue one and I drag it here, you can see in the channel box on this side that the translate Z has been moved, okay? If I grab the red and move this, you can see that the translate X is going in that direction. If I grab the green and move this, the translate Y, okay? So a very easy way to remember that. What are the colors of a computer screen? RGB, right? So red, green, blue, X, Y, Z. That's how they're alphabetically. X, Y, Z, RGB. So X is always going to be red. When we see X, we see red, those two are going to go together. When we see green, that's going to be Y. When we see blue, that's going to be Z. Okay? So those things will be important as you're working because sometimes you want to snap something in the X direction or align something in the Y direction. If we had a cube here, and I said, okay, well, I have a cube, I want to duplicate a bunch of cubes, and now I want to stack them, I have to know which way I'm stacking them. I have to say, stack these objects in the Y direction, there we go. If I hit X, or I hit Z, or I hit something wrong, it's not going to do it the correct way, okay? Just for fun, what would X do? There we go. See, that's not the way I wanted them stacked. So now I have to undo it, and then try the next one, and then say, okay, that worked. Sometimes it doesn't work on the second, sometimes it's the third time. But just handy to know what those are, okay? So just keep that in mind. Undo is a very important key in Maya. It's Z.
Okay.
Control Z is for Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, everything else. Maya is just Z, okay? So you can hit Z 50 times and you'll get 50 undos that are there. And it will actually undo selections. So if I deselect and reselect, that's 2 undos, okay? Shift Z is redo, okay? So if you're trying to redo something, you can hold down Shift and hit Z. So those are somewhere on the list, miscellaneous, undo and redo, okay? Z is undo, Shift Z is redo.
How are you doing the snap to?
We'll get to that in a second.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So that's that one. Okay. All right, so the next little bit that we're going to deal with is the display, what we're actually seeing here. On yours, I think everyone's in shaded mode. I think. Right now we're in shaded mode. We can't see through our object, okay? It's solid, but it has the wireframe on there still. So if we hit 4 on our screen, you'll see that we go into wireframe mode, okay? So on your viewport area, wireframe is 4. And wireframe is very handy for seeing the wires of your objects, okay, without having to select them. Also, sometimes when you're in wireframe, you can do certain things and see certain things. 5 is shaded mode. It's very easy to remember those hotkeys. 4 is wireframe, 5 is shaded mode. So now what this does is it puts our object just in gray shading so we can see what the object looks like as a solid object. 6 is the next one, which is textured, and then 7 is lighting. We'll get into using those or seeing those once we get there. The next one we're not going to hit. Do not hit number 8, but 8 is paint effects. Okay? I'm going to hit it just so you can see what's going to happen, because usually you hit it on accident and then you start freaking out. So hit 8. Magic. I have to hit 8 again. Come on. All right, in 2015, they must have screwed something up. Why isn't this working? All right, 8 is different now. All right, we're going to ignore that one for now. 8 used to be Paint Effects, and it would take you into this mode that would usually freak people out. Let me just switch to it. Nope. Get brush. Canvas. That's different. All right, 2015 must have changed that. 8 was Paint Effects. It would take your screen and make it white, and your object you had was gone, and then you had a different brush like you have in Photoshop, and it was a disaster. Okay, but that's what 8 would do before. We might have to just erase that one, or just remove it from the test totally. Where are we at? There we go. Okay, so now we're going to delete this sphere. Okay, so delete that sphere, or whatever object you have there, and we're going to create a cube. Now we're going to create a cube this way. You'll see here where it says polygons right there. This is called a shelf, this area up top. And basically, here's some tools that I use. I want to keep little icons for these tools in a very handy way to grab these tools. So this is a shelf. These are polygon tools. We're going to create the cube one, or click the cube one. And then hit F to frame it. Okay. So we created a polygon cube. We hit F to frame it. We're right on top of it. So we're going to go through the next 3 hotkeys, which is rough, medium, and smooth. So rough is 1. That's what we're looking at right now, is rough mode. 2 is both. And then 3 is smooth. Okay? So rough, both, and smooth, or whatever I have it labeled there, medium. Okay? So what this allows you to do is we can take an object like a cube, and Maya gives you a preview. What would this look like if I smoothed out this cube? That's what it would look like. What would both of them look like together? That's what 2 is. Okay? Typically when you model something like a human, there's so much detail that goes into a face that you can't work with it on a full res basis. So you work with it in a very rough phase, and then you smooth it out, and then you do work to it. Okay? So we typically work in this mode, and then we smooth it out to get that mode. Okay? So that's why we use 1, 2, and 3 to get the rough, medium, and smooth look to our object. Okay? So that's the next ones, which is rough, medium, and smooth. Oops. Standard full screen. Control spacebar. Okay? This is like hitting F, I think, or tab in Photoshop, one of those things that takes you out of all your tools. So control spacebar, just a way to hide all your stuff or show all your tools. Okay? When you get to a certain level, you work like this because you want as much screen space, as much screen screen space that you can take. Okay? Especially like if you're in those Macs that have 27-inch screens, it's incredibly helpful. If for some reason you get stuck and control spacebar doesn't bring back all of your junk, if you go under display, just as a bonus tip, UI elements, restore all or show all, it will show all your UI elements. Okay, just as a bonus tip. Change background color, Alt B. So you hold down Alt and hit B, and that cycles through all of your background colors. Alright, so right now we have the navigation menu we've done, the viewport menu we've done, the menus we've done. File operations are the same as every other program. Control N for new scene, Control O for open scene, and Control S for save scene. Okay. What I want you to do now is I want you to make a new scene. Don't save it. You can even hit Control N and then hit N again for not saving it. And then I want you to build a Lego. And this is always a good way just to kind of get used to some of the tools that we've used. So first I'm going to pull up an image of a Lego so you can see what a Lego looks like. And usually we find a really good picture of a Lego. There we go, perfect. We don't have to be this accurate. Actually, you may find one that has the 6 peg on it. Man. Oh, there it is. That one's perfect. Okay. Now we don't need the text in here, but what I want is I want a cube and I want cylinders on here. Okay, that's all the two shapes, cube and cylinders. I'm going to show you what I don't want because that'll just avoid people doing this right off the bat. Okay, here's a cube, and then here's a cylinder, and then Control D is duplicate, just so we have that down too. And what I'm doing here is I'm just positioning these, and you'll see that I'm grabbing this middle one and positioning this. Okay, you can see this is not going to be a pretty Lego. Okay. All right, there we go. So now as I spin around, you can see this Lego looks really jacked up. No kid would want to play with that. All right. What you should be doing as you're creating these things is you can see how I'm just moving one direction at a time. I want the Lego longer, I grab the one to make it longer. I want it to be wider, I grab the one to make it wider. Okay? I want a cylinder, I'm just clicking on the cylinder button. I want it to be skinnier, so I'm going to grab the green. Look at that, it makes it skinnier. I want it shorter, I'm going to grab this one and make it shorter. I'm going to move around the entire scene and try to line this up. Make that a little bit thicker. Come on. There we go. And I think that's probably a little bit too long, so I'm just going to scale that down. I'll pull this back here. And I'm just going to give you a little trick. I'm going to duplicate it and scoot it over. And I'm going to grab both of these and duplicate it. And duplicate it. There we go. So that's a 6-1, not an 8-1. Okay? But you can see how from all directions this looks like a Lego. Like someone could look at that and say, oh, you're making a Lego. Okay? So I'm going to throw the reference image up there, spin around your scene, make this little Lego. All right, so here's the Lego that I created in that time as well. I made it a little bit more advanced. It has the word My on it, obviously, so it's extra awesome. I'm just going to push those down a little bit more. There we go. I've also added some bevels to the sides of this. That way it's a little bit rounded. Same thing with the brick here. I've also added the underside, so we have all this data. A lot of what we do when we're modeling something is we have to understand the end result. Okay? Think of this like you're doing a Photoshop picture, and you're going to draw a picture of a dog. Right when you start, you have an idea. Okay, I'm going to draw a picture of a dog. What do I start with as my DPI? You know, is this going to be printed? Is it going to be for a website? What am I starting with? Right? Same thing happens here. We have to understand what our end result is. If this is going to be something that's going to be used, let's say, I just look for Lego Movie. There we go. Let's say we're using this as a Lego to build this entire background area. A lot of the detail that I added to it is unnecessary, okay? Because a lot of it you don't even see. Like if this Lego that's right here, and I'm just doing a couple extra things just to make it easier for me, and I duplicate this and set it here. And then obviously, because this is a building, we would have this. And there will be some overlapping, obviously, but don't nail me on that. There we go. Okay, so you can see right now how slow my computer is going with just this one wall of Legos, because each one of those Legos is immensely detailed and there's a lot of stuff going on. Okay, and you don't even see the inside part of that. You don't even see the fact that I wrote Maya on each one of those Legos. So we have to keep in mind, what is the end product? For a lot of cases, that's as simple as we need it. In some cases, that's as simple as we need it. Okay, just a box. Just the box that's colored like a Lego, and that will give the idea of it. And then if we did have something, you know, that we needed a little bit fancier, let me make sure I grab it all. I think I got it all. I could take this and just set it on top of that one. And as far as you know, that bottom one is also a Lego that has all that detail to it. Just because we see the detail here, we assume that the bottom one also has that. Okay? So a lot of the stuff we do, we have to keep that stuff in mind. You wouldn't draw that dog that's for a small icon on a website at 100 inches by 100 inches at 6,000 DPI. That would be just a waste of time to do that, right? So we just have to keep those things in mind as we start building stuff. What is the end result? This is, let me just save this. I'm saving it because we're going back into it, that's it. I'm possibly going to save it. There we go. I'm going to open up this other scene that I have. Details. And this file is huge. This is a much more complex scene that we're going to be looking at. It's 100 megabytes for this one scene, so there's a lot of geometry in it. Okay, just to give you an idea of how big our other scene was. Open that too. So my Lego, wow, my Lego is bigger. That's depressing. And odd. Whatever. Alright, but this scene obviously is a lot bigger. There's a lot more stuff going on. For whatever reason, my Lego one is actually bigger than this. It must have a lot of detail in that other one. Okay? So as I'm creating this thing, and this guy just somehow inflated. He shouldn't have been that big. Or maybe he was that big, I don't remember. But there's a lot of detail that goes into this. And there's a lot of things that as I'm working on this, I'm considering, you know, what am I going to see? I'm not seeing really the back of this too closely, so I don't need to model too much detail here. I don't see the back of this too closely, so I don't need to model that much detail there. Okay? And a lot of the stuff, like all these brackets, I could actually just get rid of. Even though functionally we would need those things to be there, for the scene I wouldn't unless I was seeing the back of that. Let me go over here to my cabling. Here's a bunch of plugs that I have plugged in here. I have those there because through this I do see those, so I want those there. On this thing, there's some markers, so I have to go through and see, do I see those markers, yes or no? If I don't see them, get rid of them. Okay? There's actually one of my cameras for this scene is over here. So a lot of the detail I have on the front of this computer desk I can get rid of because I don't need it. These books that are over here are kind of off to the side. Some of these are pretty complex in how they're modeled. I have one that's really complex. Maybe it's on the desk. Yeah, this one here. There's a lot of detail in this book right there. But if I go over here to this book, it's a box. Okay? And this box is actually several books. It's actually like several books kind of stacked together and a picture of those on the side of it. Okay? So you just have to keep a lot of this stuff in mind as to, you know, what you're seeing and what you don't see and how you model the stuff that's in there. I'm going to show you a couple pictures of the final rendering of these, or final-ish.
Like, how long did it take you to make that scene?
I worked for a bit of the summer over it, maybe a month to make that. A lot of this was, you just kind of go into it and say, I'm going to build a chair, and you spend an hour on a chair, and you build this thing, and that took me maybe an hour to do. And then you move stuff around, and then you modify it and do whatever. A lot of these I have textures on, and some of these is just render time. Just that time, just when you hit the render button, it just takes a long time to do.
So you made these individually, and then you put them all together?
Mm-hmm.
So when your computer's rendering, can you generally do something else on your computer? Or do you
Yes
kinda
and no.
leave it
Depending on what it's doing, it's usually best just to kind of leave it alone.
alone? 'Cause it'll just slow everything down?
Right. But you can still do it depending on how critical it is. You can still work on stuff. It's just a matter of, it might take an hour versus 40 minutes. Okay. Oops. So here is one of those early images of that scene where there's just, this is a little robot guy in a chair and some of the detail that's in there. And there's just lighting inside here, okay? Just some default lighting just so I can see some of the stuff. And I'm getting it from different camera angles.
That's why you have depth of field, because you
Right, that's added in after. After I've done my rendering, I've added that in post. And now I'm starting to add some of the coloring in the scene just to see how it's going to look. There's also some textures on here. You can see that the board here has a texture. Some of those papers, even though we can't see them too good, also have a texture on them. And I've added more papers to it. And now the computer screens are in there. The chair has a texture. This little gel mat has a texture. There's that chunk of book. Okay? Without me telling you that that's a box, you wouldn't have known that. You would have assumed, hey, those are books. You modeled each one of those individually. But it's actually just a box, one picture on there. And it's actually just a picture I found on the internet. Just some guy actually had a picture of his bookshelf with all those books on it. And so I could just pop those in. And there's the screen. This is, again, another screen that I grabbed. You can see the quality of the texture. This is a picture. Can't see it up there. This projector sucks. There's detail. You can, like the mesh that's on a typical speaker, you can see on that. You can see the detail on this here. This is actually a picture of the lens of a camera that I dropped on there to make it look like the lens of this video camera. And this is just a computer screen image. You can see the coloring here and some of the look of that. And the coloring, this still has to be added, have detail added to it. You can definitely see the paper detail that's in there now. And now I'm getting into the actual, like what the final scene is going to look like. Okay. And you can see the stuff has little glows on it. That's a really cool shot right there. Okay, but it all starts with just those basic foundational, dropping stuff in. A lot of this is duplicated stuff. Like this whole desk is just a duplicated desk that I've moved around and just adjusted some of the stuff. This monitor was my original monitor that I modified the base on this one, and I modified the base on that one. And this one I modified the base, I think. Yeah, I changed the frame also. It's a little bit thicker. Here's the keyboard, just a bunch of cubes, basically, on another cube. Here's an open book. That's just a cube that's just been stretched out and just modified to give it that rounded shape. If I hit 1, you can see there's the rough mode, and I hit 3, there's a smooth mode. Remember we were talking about that 1, 2, and 3. This is a little robotic guy. Let me shrink his joints down. There we go. And this guy can move a little bit. And if I had controls on, there we go. Look at those little arms. There's also Starbucks coffees. Again, lots of duplication in this. It's just a matter of figuring out the easiest way to duplicate and reuse what you've already done. Even these wires here, I basically made a group of wires and duplicated them and moved them and rotated them and duplicated them and rotated them and duplicated them and moved them, and it looks like a big clustering of wires. Okay? And that guy up there too. And some of these, like this guy was brought in from a different scene. And then this other robot who's laying on the ground was brought in from another scene. But you don't see them, they're just kind of like filler material just so you can kind of see something's over there. But you can see I don't see any of this stuff from this back camera view. I don't see where these cords go either from that back camera view, so I don't need to add the actual plugs to them. Here's the hallway. I don't see further than this, so I don't need to model the entire thing. Come on. It just kind of squares off. Okay, so as you're working on stuff, you'll see that in certain areas, you know, why aren't we modeling this specific thing, or why aren't we modeling the staples for the stapler? Well, we're not going to see the staples. We're not going to animate this thing. There's specific reasons we model things a certain way. And we model them because of their use, why we're using them, what we're going to do with them. Let me reopen that other one. Save. It's very surprising that the Lego scene is so much bigger. Just for fun. Is it poly count? I turned on what's called poly count. Oh, I guess so. Poly count counts how many different points I have inside my scene. Right now, I have 4,400,716 points, which is unbelievable. Try that wording Maya. Could be. It just seems like that's a ridiculous amount. Whatever.
So if that wording weren't only on the top ones and not duplicated, it'd be a small
Oh yeah,
file.
definitely. I can actually go through just so we can see what that would look like. And I'm going to marquee all of this. There we go. There's 4 million right there. I'm going to deselect those. There we go. Just using this cube, I'm down to 107,000. So, and you can see my scene now is actually spinning around pretty good. Okay, that 4 million may not even render. If I hit the render button on that, I'm just going to not even save it, but it may not even render just because it's too much stuff for it to render. All right, so we're going to save our scene, we're going to save our preferences, and then we're going to be done for the day. Okay. We're going to save this a certain way though, so don't save yet. Okay. When we do stuff inside Maya, we have to have everything organized, like I said. Maya wants you to stay organized, so it has tools to help you stay organized. So we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to the project window. The project window is basically where we can create that level of organization. It allows us to create one folder, and Maya will populate it with a bunch of folders to help keep us organized. Okay, so we're going to hit New on the top right, and you're just going to call it your last name _ playing around. Okay, don't hit anything else after that, just last name _ playing around. Then we have to tell Maya where we want to save this at. So we're going to click on the folder, bless you, and we're going to find on the D drive our last name Fall 14 folder. And inside 2510, inside work, we're going to hit select. Okay, so the name up here should be D : whatever your last name is _F14 / 2510 / work. Are we good so far? Good. Okay. All these folders here, that's what Maya's going to create. So our scene, which is our big one, that's where we save our actual Maya file, that's going to go into the scenes folder. All right, so we're going to hit accept. And now when we go to File, Save, you'll see that it jumps you right into, well, it didn't do it for me because I already saved mine. But let me just go to Save As and take me there. There we go. So it's going to take you right into your scenes folder. So there's playing around. It made that folder. There's scenes. It made that folder. And then we're just going to give it a name. Call it Lego and then hit Save. Okay. So now we have our scene file. So now let's close Maya. So we're going to click on the file and go to Exit. Okay. The stuff that we've done so far, we've only set up a couple preferences. But the stuff we've done so far, we want to make sure we save. Okay. When the next guy comes in and he goes to File, Open in Maya, it's going to jump right to your folder, and your files are going to be accessible. That's where they can go, oh, well, I want that. And they open it up and they screw it up and save it, and then you're screwed. Okay, so I'm just going to close out these extra windows. And close any other windows you might have open. Okay, we don't need to have those open. It's just going to confuse everyone. All right, and then we're going to go to Computer, D drive. Make sure you close Maya down too, because you need to close it down in order for it to actually save the preferences out. Okay, so now everyone should have a Maya folder right on the D drive, correct? Okay, inside the Maya folder, you should now have a 2015-X64 folder, correct? Okay, so we're going to Control X to cut those. Okay, so hold down Control and tap the X key.